I am Fred Thomas. I am a self-employed locksmith. My specialty is known as a safecracker, and I do a lot of work for the local banks. I'm 30 years old and have been married to Mary for 7 years. Mary is 26. We have 2 boys, Terry, age 6, and Danny, age 4. I am very successful, so of course we live in a house that Mary says denotes our status. Some of the stories I have read call them McMansions. I was sitting in my living room worried about where my family was at 11:30 on a Thursday night. My wife had a Women's Charity Association meeting that was supposed to be over at 8. My kids normally stay with my folks or her folks on the meeting nights. I had already spoken to my dad, and he said the kids had not been there tonight. I was just about to call my least favorite person, my mother-in-law, to see if my wife and kids were there. As I was getting up to grab my phone from the kitchen table when the landline rang. The number on the caller ID screen was blocked. When I answered hello, the person calling asked, "Is this the Thomas residence?" I will answer that question when you identify yourself. This is the Dunfield County Sheriff's dispatcher. Is this the Thomas residence? Yes. And thank you for not going off on me. I am worried about my family. The dispatcher then said the words that changed my life forever. Your wife and children were involved in a hit-and-run car accident in Oak Township. The children are in our office on Lackett Road, but your wife has been medevaced to Bauer Regional Medical Center. I do not know her condition and could not give that information over the phone. I'm sorry I can't be more of a help. I have to go now. I must inform the other person's next of kin. I thanked her and hung the phone up. I was in almost a catatonic state for a couple of minutes. Then the questions started. What was she doing on the other side of the county, almost 45 miles from her mother's house if that's where the kids were? Who was she with? Next of kin. After I realized that only Mary could answer those questions, I called my dad and asked him to go get the kids because his house is much closer to the sheriff's office than I was. I called that office and identified myself and explained that my father would be there to pick them up. I gave them a brief description and his name. I then made the dreaded call to the Wicked Witch of the South, my mother-in-law, Louise. I told her to not say anything until I gave her the information I had. Of course, she couldn't be that sensible, and before I even finished, she screeched out, "Okay, you asshole! What kind of fuck-up did you do now?" I told her to shut up and if she needed to know what this call was about to call me on my cell phone as I was leaving. I slammed the phone back in the cradle, grabbed my coat, and drove to the hospital. About 10 minutes after I left home, I arrived at the hospital. An officious prick of a rent-a-cop stated, "Visiting hours are over. You can't come in." I was pissed off already, so rather than explaining that I was there to see my wife in the emergency room, I said, "Listen, you little ignorant piece of crap, if you closed, how did my wife get into the emergency room, and are you going to turn that ambulance that I hear coming away? Huh? Answer that prick?" The guard at first seemed to get his back up, but my explanation must have sunk in, as he said, "I'm really sorry, but I thought that as you came to the main entrance, that you were here for some routine visits. The ER entrance is just around the side of that door over there. Again, I am really sorry, and I hope everything turns out okay." I mumbled a half-assed apology and ran down to the ER and asked what room Mary Thomas was in. "We do not have anyone by that name here. May I ask what her arrival was about? We have a woman who was airlifted here, but she did not have any ID. Perhaps she is your wife." I just lost it. I screamed in the lady's face. "She was flown into this hospital because she was in a car accident. Now may I see her?" She flinched and apologized. "I'm sorry for my seeming lack of feeling, but we have been having problems with some of the local gangs and troublemakers. I will buzz you through and have someone escort you to her treatment room. I know you probably want to know her condition, but I just don't have that info here." When I got to the treatment room, the desk nurse said that the patient was in the X-ray department and should be returning from there shortly. She told me that I could go into the room and sit until she returned. I got into the treatment room and all I found was Mary's bent glasses and the remains of her dress. I also found a deputy sheriff standing against the wall. "Who are you?" he asked politely. I explained everything that had happened so far. I also asked him to check with his dispatcher to see if my kids had been picked up yet. He said he would, as soon as my wife returned. He also said that my wife was unconscious when she was brought in and had not awoken when they took her to an X-ray. While I was waiting for her to return from the X-ray, I pondered some of the things I was told and what I had observed. Who was the other person in the car? Why was there no underwear or pantyhose with the torn dress? Where was her purse? Where was her car? My contemplations were interrupted by one of the staff asking the usual question about the patient and who was going to be responsible for the medical expenses. By then, I was wearier than angry, and so I politely gave the man the information that I had. About 10 minutes later, they wheeled her back to the treatment room, and a doctor came in and asked me to step outside of the curtain with him. The doctor told me that Mary was extremely lucky to only receive a concussion and a broken arm, as the police said that she was not wearing a seatbelt. He did say that her not waking up was a concern, but her MRI and CAT scans showed no swelling of the brain, and her EEG showed normal activity. The doctor asked me if I had any ideas about what she may have on her mind that might cause her to subconsciously wish to remain asleep. I told him not that I knew. I asked if they were going to admit her and if I could go in and sit with her. The doctor said, "Go sit with her. It can't hurt. And if you were to talk to her, she might even wake up. We are going to admit her and continue monitoring her until she wakes. Or we find she won't wake up and send her to the long-term wing. With head injuries, it could go either way." I sat in the treatment room telling her all about my mundane day at work. I was thinking about my questions again and must have mumbled something about who was in the car with her when alarms started going off and I was pushed out of the room. Waiting for me outside was the deputy. He handed me a coffee and tried to hand me packets of powdered milk and sugar. I said thanks, but I drank it black. He also said that my dad had picked up the kids. I thanked him for the heads up. We sat down, and I started asking questions. For most of them, the deputy could or would not answer, as he had been dispatched from his patrol area and not the accident scene. Just about then, I realized that there would not be a deputy on site for a routine traffic accident. That raised more questions that definitely needed answers to. I asked the deputy if there was any information he could give me to understand what happened and where it happened. The deputy said, "The only thing I was told was to get here and guard an accident victim who was coming in by chopper. Sorry, I can't help more." That was a dead end, I realized, because even if he knew more, he could not tell me. I thanked him and went in search of the doctor. The staff had calmed Mary down, and so I went in again and sat by her. She must have sensed a presence because she squirmed enough to flip her blanket off her legs. I got up and started to cover her back up when I saw a definite hickey on the inside of her thigh and dried semen on the inside of the other leg. I suddenly felt lightheaded and quickly sat down to calm myself. After a couple of minutes, I walked out in search of the doctor. I found him at the nurse's station. I asked if he had a room where we could talk. He led me to a consultation room and asked if there was a problem. I said, "There may be a very big problem, but you could help me solve it." I asked him to do a rape kit, a pregnancy test, and a DNA test as my wife had dried semen on her leg. I told him that if it was there before she got here, then the problem was mine to deal with. If it was not there when she arrived, then his hospital had a huge problem. The doctor's eyes got very big, and he stammered out, "Of course, and I will see that is given priority." I thanked him, and he left to go order the test. I wandered out to the nurse's station and asked if there were any of my wife's personal possessions besides what was in the room. They said that her dress, glasses, and one shoe were all that came in with her. They asked why I was asking. I told them that when she left the house to go to her meeting, she had a purse big enough to be a man's 2 suitors, and she always wore a bra, panties, and pantyhose. They said they would check with the chopper crew, but that they are very good about personal effects. Then they said that as soon as an orthopedic doctor arrived, they would clean her up and cast the broken arm. I told them that I did not want her cleaned up yet, as the doctor is going to do a rape kit and a pregnancy test. I told them what I observed and mentioned that I hadn't been intimate with my wife for over a week. Needless to say, that statement got a lot of raised eyebrows and a look over to the deputy who's still standing vigil. At about that time, 2 people came through the entrance and pulled out sheriff's badges and asked if the med-evac patient was awake and able to answer questions. After they were told that she had become agitated, she was sedated and would not be available for any conversation until late this afternoon. The deputies turned to leave, and I asked them to talk to me as I was Mary's husband. They said they would tell me all that they could, but not in the hall. The head nurse said we could use the same room that I used with the doctor. Once in the room, the deputies asked for my ID and then identified themselves as Deputy John Rover and Deputy Alice Klein. With those formalities out of the way, I asked them to tell me what they could about the accident. Deputy Rover started. He said, "It looks like about 9:45 p.m. a car traveling at a high rate of speed on Claiborne Road came up to and attempted to pass the car your family was in. That driver did not allow enough room and clipped the corner of the family's car. Their car went into the ditch and flipped until it came to rest on its roof. No one in the front seat was belted in, and the kids were in their proper belted-in car seats. The driver of the other car did not even apply his or her brakes and fled the scene. At about 10:30, a driver saw the taillights in the ditch and called 911. Because of the violent tossing and bouncing motion of the car before it came to rest, at this time, we do not know which of the front seat occupants was driving. Your wife was unconscious and the other front seat occupant was dead." He must have seen the confusion on my face, and he asked, "Do you have any questions?" "Yes. I have a lot of questions, but you probably can't answer some of them. Can you give me the identity of the other occupant other than my family?" "Not at this," Deputy Klein started to say. Deputy Rover held up his hand and asked, "Do you know of a George Krause Jr. of Glenbrook Estates?" "That is my wife's boss's name. Was he the other person in the car?" "Yes. His family has or is currently being notified of his death, and that is the name that the wrecked car was registered to." "Okay, I only have one more question, and I will let you go about your business. Did anyone pick up my wife's purse?" "Yes, we have the purse in our cruiser outside, and I will see that you get it before we leave." "I am, and I am sure Alice is willing to answer any other questions as soon as we are cleared to do that. We are sorry for the trouble this brings you, but your wife was very lucky not to have died also. We will say good night and get the purse." A couple of minutes later, Deputy Klein handed me my wife's purse. After she left, I began looking through the purse and found the missing underwear. The panties were a thong style I had never seen before, and the bra was a revealing type with open areas at the front. There were no pantyhose, but instead, there were stockings and a garter belt. I was almost crushed by that, but when I found that she had pictures in there, I lost it. I went to the nurse's station and told them that I was going home and that I would not be back to pick my wife up, but would make arrangements to have it done. By the time I got home, it was past 4 a.m. I called my answering service and told them that I would not be responding to any calls and to send them to my backup. I then locked my wife's purse in a safe I keep in the shop that I have above our garage. I then tried to sleep. I slept a little and woke up at 10 a.m. I started making plans to handle the situation. I made a list of things that had to be done. I needed to protect my business, my money, and my kids. I called the bank that I use for my business and locked down all of my business accounts. I then called the bank where we have our personal accounts and did the same thing. I canceled all of our credit cards except the one that still had a small balance. I then called my dad and asked him if he would be willing to help me do something very unusual, take the kids and go to his cottage for a couple of weeks and not talk to anyone while he was there. Of course, he asked why, and I told him what had happened and what I found. I also told him that my next call was to find a divorce shark. I then called my business lawyer and friend, Jack Wilson, and asked him to give me the name of the meanest asshole of a divorce lawyer. While I was talking to him, he assured me that Mary could not get any part of my business, as we had incorporated, and she only had one share of stock. I thanked him and said that I would see him as soon as I knew more. The name that Jack gave was a surprise. It was a classmate of mine, Susan Van Deer. We had dated in high school and found that we had very little spark and parted on friendly terms. When I called her office, her secretary put me through as soon as Sue was available. After a few seconds of, "Hi, how are yous?" Sue asked why I needed a divorce lawyer. I related everything that I had found out and all of the circumstances. I told her to do her worst. I told her that because Mary took the kids with her on her tryst, I would insist on sole custody of the kids, with supervised visits only. I also wanted to sue the dead asshole's company for every penny we could get. The last thing I said was, "Do not serve her until she is released from the hospital." After those things were taken care of, I sat back in my chair and pondered some things that were still unanswered. How long had it been going on? Was this the first guy? Where the hell is her car? I had no answers, so I girded my loins and started to enter the lion's den by calling the Wicked Witch. It was then that I had my first laugh of the day, as I realized that my cell was still on the kitchen table. I looked and there were 7 calls from her. I called her and listened to her tirade for about 90 seconds when I had enough. I used my best window-breaking whistle to get her attention and said, "Listen, stupid. If you would have shut up last night instead of going off on me, you would know what is going on. Now, do you want to know, or am I too much of a worthless good-for-nothing to tell you that your daughter is in the hospital?" She started in with, "Why didn't you?" I interrupted with, "When I tried to tell you last night, you didn't let me. But of course it was my fault, and because I am such an insensitive jerk and uncaring asshole, that in my panic I forgot my cell phone in my rush to get to the hospital. Now do you want to listen?" I heard a sheepish, "Yes." Mary and the kids were in a hit-and-run car accident in Oak Township. The kids are with my father and are okay. Mary is in Bower Hospital with a concussion and a broken arm, and the man she was with is dead. She came back with, "What man?" Her boss, and it was likely not the first time since Mary has pictures of them being intimate. "Now I know you're being an asshole," she replied. "I have the pictures. I also have talked to a lawyer, and she will be served divorce papers as soon as you got her from the hospital." "I get her. Aren't you going to get her?" "No, and I am not even going to talk to her except through my attorney. She is not welcome here in this house without an officer of the court." I was finally letting some of my anger out, and I said in about a shout, "She endangered my kids while getting her rocks off with someone she should not have even been with. You can tell her I said that when and if she asks why I was not picking her up. I am also taking a restraining order out that she is not to come in contact with me or the kids without a court officer being present." I calmed down and apologized for yelling and said I had to go as I had a lot of things to do. Louise said that she was sorry about all the bad things she said and that I did not deserve what Mary had done to me. She then hung up. I called Sue back and told her that I had forgotten that I wanted the restraining order and told her why. She said that she was going to call me about something like that. She also asked about my finances, the house, the cars, and my business. I gave her Jack's number and said that everything that we owned was part of the corporation, except for the kids' college trust funds. I also told her that I had locked up all of our accounts but did not take any money out. I then said that as soon as I was off the phone with her, I was changing all of the locks on the house, the shop, the garage, my car, my service truck, and when I found it, her car, as they all were the property of the business. Sue said that she would get the restraining order ASAP and would not wait to have it served. She also said that the company Mary worked at had a no fraternization policy, and so if I gave the go-ahead, she would prepare a lawsuit against them. I again urged her to do her worst and asked if it was worth going after the asshole's estate. "Wheels are in motion," she said back. I arranged for my neighbor's high school kids to rotate babysitting duties when the kids came home, and I started going on calls again. The 2 young ladies, Lydia was 18 going on 30, and Angie was 16 almost 17. They loved my boys and said that when they couldn't cover, their network of girls could. I set up a payment schedule and gave the girls a couple of daily limit debit cards for stuff they might need for the boys. I finally sat down and popped a Gatorade and considered all that I had discovered. I also contemplated what might happen going forward. Saturday morning, the hospital administration called and said that Mary had awakened and asked when I was coming down to visit. I asked to talk to the duty nurse on her floor and was transferred. After identifying myself, I asked for an update on her condition. When the nurse said she could not give me that information on the phone, I said, "I'll be there in a couple of hours. I haven't eaten since last night." She said my wife would be glad to hear that. "I will not be visiting my wife. I am just interested in her medical status. Would you also check and see when the treating ER doctor will be available for a meeting and to go over the results of the special test he did last night?" The nurse asked what she should tell my wife. I said, "I do not want you to tell her anything, but if you do, just say that the accident changed things and I have to deal with them. Also, say that I found her purse and I have it here at my house." I thanked her for the care she was giving Mary and that as soon as I could get there, I would. I ate some stuff that I scrounged from the refrigerator and drove to the hospital. The ER doctor and the head floor nurse were both available. I found out that Mary was going to be released the next day and that the floor nurse asked when I would be available to pick her up. I just laughed and said, "When pigs start flying." I then related the story and that I was going from talking to her to talking to the doctor who did the rape kit. The nurse said that she understood and left to continue her duties. I spotted a stranger heading for Mary's room. A few seconds later, a scream came from her room, and so I assumed that she got the restraining order. I went to the lobby and had the ER doctor paged. He arrived a few minutes later and took me into his work area. The news was both good and bad. The semen was too old to have come from either the hospital staff or the helicopter crew. The bad news was it was at least likely that it belonged to the deceased driver. The doctor also found indications of anal penetration. He had all of that information in a written report. That really pissed me off. I have asked many times to try anal and was told that that was too nasty, so after several such responses, I let it drop. I thanked the doctor and took the report, left the hospital, and went to the lawyer's office to give her the report. Sue just about creamed her jeans when she read the report. That it was a real gotcha document. Sue did ask me why I asked for the rape kit, as that question will come up if Mary's lawyer decides to contest the divorce. I explained that I saw the semen, and from everything that I was told, Mary had not been conscious at any time since the accident. I told Sue that stockings and panties were missing when Mary was in the ER, and I wanted to find out if she had been raped. Mary was released and went to her parents' house. She and her mother had called me and screamed into the phone. I ignored Mary's call, but called my soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law, and when she picked up, she just started screaming, so I hung up. The phone rang again before I took 3 steps away. I saw who it was and let it go to the answering machine, and a very meek voice asked me to call her back. When I did, I told her to put her husband Ray on, or I would hang up again. She did, and I explained to him that I would not be screamed at by his shrew of a wife. I also said to him that if he needed an explanation, ask his daughter why she took her kids with her on her cheating tryst. He said that he had put the phone on speaker and both women had just fainted. He laughed and said that they were both drama queens, and after all these years, he just ignored them. Then he got serious and asked if I was going to cut them off from their grandchildren. I assured him that he and the shrew could come over or the kids could visit, but Mary could not be with them unless a court officer was there. If the restraining order was lifted, that would of course change, but I was going to try to have it made permanent. He said he was sorry about how I felt, but that he understood. He then thanked me for talking to them. He said he would stay in touch. Then he said goodbye. After the phone call, all of the suppressed feelings came forward, and I cried myself to sleep. My dad called after I woke up and said the boys were fine and did not understand what happened, so they were not having any problems. I asked that he keep them for at least a few days. I brought him up to date on all of the developments. I also told him about the court order and told him not to let Mary near the kids without someone from the court with her. He said that he would not take any calls except his ex-wife or me. He said he would give me daily updates. He told me goodbye and hung up. I sat in the living room with all the curtains and drapes closed and just thought about what a mess my life was now. I did my best to try to understand what had caused Mary to do this to our family. We had our little arguments, but nothing major. Mary had repeatedly said that she did not want more kids, so I got snipped. After that, until about 3 weeks ago, we had a rich, if somewhat vanilla sex life at Mary's insistence. We didn't have any money problems. Mary only worked because, in her words, "I'm not just a housewife and I'm bored." She had worked for the company her boss worked at for about 15 months. I was not getting anywhere when a very mean and cruel thought occurred to me. I called my father-in-law. When the shrew answered, she was subdued. I asked to talk to her husband. When Ray came on, I asked him to also put the phone on speaker. I then asked him to ask my wife how the kids' car seats got into her boss's car. Then, before anyone could say anything, I asked where the company car that Mary was driving was, as I needed to recover it since she was not going to ever use it again. I heard that laugh again, and he said this time only Mary fainted, but Louise was red-faced, angry, and ready to scream. I said I was sorry for putting him through all this, and he could call me when he got the answers. At that point, I remembered that all of our vehicles had a GPS locator in them. The corporation's insurance vendor insisted on it for recovery in case of theft. I got on my computer and brought up the program that I had that read the GPS. Her car was at a local Mickey D's. It was close enough that I got Snoopy to go with me to drive it home. I had Snoopy put the car in the garage. It had the car seats that I bought for the kids in it. I locked everything up. I called Ray back and told him about the car. He told me that Mary was very upset and would not tell him anything. I explained that when the other papers were served, he should have some smelling salts around. I asked him to put the phone on speaker again and asked, "Ask Mary whose idea it was to duplicate the child seats into her boss's car? And if she was not planning a long-term cheating arrangement, when was she going to have me served with divorce papers? Also, let her know I have her purse and the pictures are eye-opening." I heard a thud in the background and Ray laughed again. I also told him that Mary should contact an attorney because she needs to protect herself in the divorce. Ray got a catch in his voice and asked if there was a chance to call the divorce off. I told him I did not think there was any way it could be stopped because of the danger she put the kids in and the disrespect she showed by taking them with her to meet with her lover. I also said that she would not be able to get anything from the house without someone from the court. But if Ray wanted to come over, I would help him get any clothes, and clothes only, that Mary might need. Ray said that he would check with Mary and be over to get what she needed. The boys were too young to understand what was going on, but they loved the girls. Mary tried to call me, but I hung up after telling her to set up a meeting in either of the lawyers' offices. I said I would otherwise record all calls. Mary was fired for violations of the no-frat policy. She called and screamed at me, but I just said that she had signed for the employee manual. If she did not read it, it was not my fault. Mary made arrangements to take the boys for a weekend, and Ray said she had a fit when she had to pay for the court official. Apparently, that was the law in our area. The lawsuits dragged through the courts until the hit-and-run driver was caught. It was George's wife, and she showed no remorse for killing him. That caused the company and George's estate to settle. It also took the wind out of Mary's sail in fighting the divorce. She claimed that she did not know George was married. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.